Okay, so we're starting a new chapter today, um, but we have to review some of the things of the old chapter because there's two sides of the coin in order to be able to make sense of this. Okay, so we're starting on Maimer Lamed Ches, page Shin Samach Beis. That's today's new shir. And we spent the last 3 weeks, I believe it was, on the previous year, where we spoke at length about the battles between Paras and Romi, right? And who's going to be victorious, and ultimately they're going to be fighting each other until the end. And then we saw the pessimistic note at the end on page Shin Samach, right? That ultimately they're going to get together and gang up on us. Okay, so that's makes it sound pretty grim. Right? At the bottom of page Shin Samach, right? It says, he says, at the bottom of page Shin Samach. It says, Yishmael ve'esav nilchamim b'Mashiach. Yishmael and Esav. Now we had Yishmael lined up with Paras, and that was how we were dealing with Yishmael. And now we have a quotation from the Rambam that Hinei af she'hivenu kvar me'Rambam b'Igeret Teman שהפסוק וראה רכב צמד פרשים כל מלכות עשיו ומלכות ישמעאל. In other words, that's the tzemed, it's the pair of these riders, of these who are going to join together. כל מלכות עשיו ומלכות ישמעאל שיתחברו ביחד, וזה אחד מהסימנים המובהקים לביאת המשיח. And the Rambam writes that this is a clear sign of the coming of the Mashiach. If you're just joining, we're reading on the bottom of page Shin Samach for last week's shir, just to review. It's mashma that they're going to work together, and not one overcomes the other. Yesh lomar shevadai sheoto chibur sheben adam Yishmael hu boto makom shemelech Mashiach ba lemager shneim. When the Melech HaMashiach is coming to destroy both of them, they are either, in other words, but they both need to be destroyed, meaning it's true, one is going to overcome the other, and we saw that according to most Shitas, it would be that Rome was going to be overcome Paras, but and we saw there was Machlokas in the Gemara, but the Melech HaMashiach is going to have to destroy both of them. V'az heim mitchabrim kedei lilchom negdeinu, and then they join together to fight against us. They're fighting each other, but when it comes to the ultimate, the final battle, so when they see that they're both in danger, and they're both in danger of being defeated by the Mashiach, so they will join together, and the Mashiach will beat both of them. That's what we learned last week. Okay, but I just also want to draw. But in order to introduce the new chapter, we have to go back and review something that Rav Moshe taught us earlier in that same shir, and so please turn to page Shin Nun Hey. Right. Okay. And at the bottom of page Shin Nun Hey, Paras v'Romi, Yishmael ve'Esav. Okay, so we have Paras, right, against Rome. That's what the Gemara says. That's what we called the builders and the destroyers. Paras are called builders, and the Romans are called the destroyers because the Persians helped build the Beis HaMikdash, and the Romans were the destroyers of the Beis HaMikdash. But then we saw, how does Yishmael fit into this? So let's read again what he writes there. Yishmael lo nimne b'malchiot. So here, because today's shir was going to focus on Yishmael again. So we have to have a clarity on where does Yishmael fit into the whole picture. So Yishmael lo nimne b'malchiot. In order to be able to understand this, tzarich letzaref lezeh et divrei hamaral b'nogeh lemalchut Yishmael. We have to, right, join together with this. We have to combine our understanding together with what the Maharal writes regarding Malchus Yishmael. And he says in earlier Mamarim, which we did not discuss in our share, he says he brings the question of the Rishonim. Why doesn't this powerful nation of Ishmael, why isn't it mentioned? Why isn't it numbered among the four Malchiot? V'harei Yisrael galu b'neihem. The Jewish people have Golus, right, and Ishmael, the Arabs, right, are primary place of Golus, right, for many, many Jews, right? Yisrael galu b'neihem v'hem sholtim aleinu begalut b'mekomot rabim b'olam. Okay, so we gave two terutzim, and this is what we should pay attention to. So Yishmael ze paras. So one answer is Ishmael paras. Maral bekama mekomot mevayer zot b'shnei mahalchim. Maral in several places, shows us where they are, right? Explains this in two different approaches. Aleph, Adalid malchiot hanimnot hem umot shelakhu et koach hamalchut shelahem mi Yisrael. When we say that there are four malchios, there are four kingdoms, those are the four kingdoms which took their malchus from the Jewish people. And the Maral says that they took them in consecutive order. I mean, one took, right, the first were the Babylonians, right, and then came the Persians, and then came the Greeks, and then came the Romans. Those are the four malchios their whole malchus is based on the idea that the true malchus belongs to Am Yisrael. And when they displaced Am Yisrael, when they took the malchus away, they usurped the malchus from Am Yisrael. So these are the Arba Malchios that Chazal talk about. Right? Who is the one? Who are the nations who possess the Malchus Yisrael? The Malchus which really belongs to Israel, that Malchus which should rule the world, which is the Malchus Yisrael. Who has Malchus Yisrael? So first the Greeks, and as we said, first the Greeks and the Persians, first the Babylonians and the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans. That's the Seder HaDvarim, and Yishmael doesn't fit in, right? Right? Mashenkin Yishmael, right? Yesh lo zchut lemalchus b'fnei atzmo. Yishmael has a zchus of malchus on its own. It doesn't. The malchus of Yishmael doesn't emanate from the fact that they usurped Malchus Yisrael. Avraham Avinu prayed that Yishmael should be successful, that he should live, and not just live, but live and thrive. And so Memela, right, the Malchus of Yishmael is in a very different category than all the other Malchios of the Arba Malchios, and that's why it's not listed as part of the Arba Malchios, because it really is, it's a different sugya altogether. That's teretz number one. Ba'ofen nosaf, teretz maral, another way, shemalchut Yishmael nichlelet b'malchut paras. That Malchus Yishmael is included in Malchus Paras, ve'af sheparas hu lo migeza shem, and then we have to deal with an issue that racially Persians are from the Geza of Yefet, and the Ishmael are from the Geza descended from Shem, for the descendants of Abraham Avinu. Okay, so but in the tochen and content and the essence of the thing, there's a connection between Paras and Ishmael. So the point that we need to make is we're going to read a new chapter, and we're going to see a new chapter is going to be completely different than this chapter that we've been learning. Right? In other words, the place of Yishmael, we're going to be dealing exclusively with Yishmael in the next chapter, and it's very, very different from the treatment that we gave, that Moshe gives to Yishmael in the chapter that we have, this chapter that we finished last week. So the answer is, my answer, after thinking about it and trying to reconcile the two chapters, is that each chapter is going with one of the terutzim of the Maharal, meaning the earlier chapter, the one that we finished last week, took the second teretz of the Maharal and put Yishmael as part of Paras, and so therefore Rav Moshe was able to toggle back and forth between the Persians and the Ishmaelis, and which primarily is based on the fact that they share a culture, a religion, in terms of that they share the religion of Islam, and Rav Moshe spoke about Islam, the sheker of Islam, and how Islam is at the root of a severe ideological conflict with Rome, okay? And we talked about the Rome is the more Gashmi way of looking at the world, is the over physicality of the world, and the Islam is the over spiritualization of the world, as we spoke about last week. Right, and both of them are elements of sheker, right? But we had Yishmael as part of Rome, as part of Paras, and that was the mahalach that we had last week, right, last year. Now we're going with the first teretz of the Maharal. The next chapter is going with the first chapter, the teretz of the Maharal, the independent koach of Yishmael, and how does that fit into the whole picture? So, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. The Maharal said two terutzim, and so we have to live with both of them, and which one is going to be played out in history? I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows. I certainly don't know. But that's how we have to keep in mind that we're dealing here with the other approach to Yishmael. Okay, that should be clear as we enter this. So now let's turn to the new chapter, page Shin Samach Beis. Okay. Let's turn to the new chapter, page Shin Samach Beis. Again, and he's going to go over some of the same basic information about the Arba Malchus. We'll see it in greater detail and perhaps with an added degree of clarity. Koach hadalid Malchus begolus v'geula. What is the koach of the four Malchus in Golus, right, and in Geula? What is their role in the Golus? What is their role in the Geula? Hinei nitbaer. Shein ledalid Malchiot zechut malchut b'fnei atzmo. That's what we saw. The Maharal told us that the Daled Malchiot, they don't have an independent zchut. I'm going with the first teretz of the Maharal. The Daled Malchiot don't have an independent zchut. Ela kol bechinat hamalchut sheyesh lahem hu rak mikoach zeh. The whole malchus of the Arba Malchios is only from the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu ha'avir et hamalchut shelanu aleihem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu transferred our malchus to them. And that's the so in other words, Malchus be'etzem is there's only one real Malchus, because the purpose of Malchus, the real purpose of Malchus in this world, is the Midas HaMalchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's to reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world, and so the Malchus which reveals HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world is Malchus Yisrael, it's Malchus Beis David. That's what reveals Malchus in this world, and that's the emes Malchus. That's Malchus as it should be and as it is, as it always will be in essence. But what happens if we lose it, if we sin, and therefore we're not ra'ui to maintain that Malchus, to preserve that Malchus for ourselves? So then the Malchus is come out, switched, handed off, right, to these guys, to those guys, to the next guys, right? And they retain a certain the koach of Malchus. They took it away from us, and they run the world. Right? Kilu for HaKadosh Baruch Hu also, but in ways which are very perverse, various ways which do not necessarily bring Malchus Shemayim into the world. But that's the Golus. So our Golus is also the Golus of Shechina. The Shechina is also in Golus because the Malchus of the other nations doesn't do what the ultimate what Malchus is ultimately supposed to do, which is to bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the world. But in any event, that's what happens. Uchemo she'mevuar b'Chazal. This is explained in Chazal, right? Shekol hadalid malchios heim keneged hadalid galiot. the Malchiot and Golios, right, go together. In other words, their Malchus is a function of our Golus. Right? Because we are in exile and we have gone into exile 4 different times, right? We've been exiled 4 times. So those 4 exiles are, right, the 4 Malchios who have exiled us and taken, as a result of that exile, they have taken our Malchus away from us. Shekol Adal Malchus and Keneged Adal Hamurumazot, the Pasuk, Bebirs Ben Abesarim, the Pasuk says, right, that when Kodesh Baruch Hu spoke to Avram Avinu, and it says, "V'hinei ema chashecha gedola nofelet alav." It says that Avram Avinu fell into this deep slumber. Ema, right? Chashecha, ema, fear. Chashecha, darkness. Gedola, great. Nofelet alav falls upon him. Ser Chazal in the Medrash. Ema zu bavel. Chashecha zu madai. Gedola zu yavan. Nofelet alav ze'avan. Okay, these are the. So this is what Avram Avinu saw, that in addition to being told about the Ger Yezer Achav Eretz Lo Lehem, that his descendants were going to descend into Egypt and be slaves for 400 years. In addition to that, Avram Avinu had this vision, right, had this experience of this great, dreadful, awesome experience of feeling the 4 Malchios and who they were. V'chein b'dome, similarly, right, as was well known, ala pasuk, the very second pasuk in Chumash, right? V'aretz ha'yisasau b'bo v'chosh al pnei tahom. Isa b'chazal. Chazal also says shehem kineged daled malchios. Daled golios or daled malchios. Shtei lashonos b'chazal. Right? In other words, Chazal sometimes refer to it as arba golios and sometimes as arba malchus. And they're also tohu is Bavel, bohu is paras, choshech is Yavan, and Tahom is Romi, Edom, Romi. Okay, that's what Chazal say there. Be'ofen shemevur, shekol koach hamalchut nitan lehem rak biglal shitchayavnu begolus. That's what. That's why he brought the pasuk of Avram Avinu first, because that's the real raya. Because the pasuk of Avram Avinu says that there's going to be arba goluyot. Your people are going to your descendants are going to go into exile in 4 different forms, 4 different nations, and therefore there will be 4 malchuyot. Chivin she'etzem hagalut hu zeh shemechayiv shemalchut sheshayechet lanu tinatein lahem. So what is it? It's the cause and the effect, right? The golus, right, mechayev necessitates that the malchus which belongs to us is given to them, because that's the nature of the thing. In other words, the malchus. One second, the malchus has to be. We're going to go into golus. Golus means that we will lose the malchus, and who are we going to lose the malchus to? Right? To whom? We're going to lose the malchus to the nations which have driven us into golus. So that's what he says. Right? In other words, Geula, therefore, right, will mean that we're not in Golus anymore. So once the Golus ends, so then the Malchus will return to its rightful place, because the Malchus is the dependent variable. Right? The independent variable is Golus. Right? We deserve Golus. We sin. Because Baruch Hu is going to drive us out of His land. Because Baruch Hu is going to destroy the Beis Hamikdash. All of these things have unfortunately happened in our history, but each one is accompanied with a golus to a certain nation, and then they take over the malchus. But when all of the goliot are going to be over, and there was going to be a geula shlema b'meira b'yameinu, so then clearly the malchus will return to where it's supposed to be. Yeah, Jory, you had a question?
Yes, I was trying to find parallels in the Pesukim between how the words line up between the nations, and for Rome it says Nophelet and to whom,
To whom?
and that seems to match up nicely. But then I was surprised to see Choshech, and one it's attributed to Paras, and then the other one it's attributed to Yavan. I mean,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
decide, but
Yeah. Okay. It's a question. I
Yeah.
haven't gone into that detail. I don't know. But,
Hmm.
yeah.
I mean, it seems that tohu, that could easily be Ema. I don't know, but anyway.
Yeah, okay, good. Seder. Again, so
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But clearly, I mean, Chazal are darshaning these psukim. They're darshaning the psukim in historical chronological order, right? Okay. There's
Hmm.
no.
Okay.
So that's the order. The order is
Hmm.
we will see. We'll see later that there are those who there's different orders, but that's really a more complicated thing. Okay, but
Hmm.
let's. Anyway, that's the introduction to this idea of the Daled Malchios, and now the question is, where does Yishmael fit in? Okay, okay, and now again, as I said earlier, now we're going with the first teretz of the Maral, right? That Yishmael fits in, right, as an independent. Not as we learned in the last chapter, right, the second teretz of the Maral that Ishmael fits in with Paras. Ishmael somehow is part of the Persian Empire, but now with the other teretz of the Maral that the Ishmael is different because Ishmael has its own independent koach, and therefore it's not part of the system of the Arba Malchios. Because okay, we'll see. Let's see inside. Yishmael v'dal malchus. Ubazeh yesh hevdel ben Yishmael v'dal malchus. This is the difference. Ki al Yishmael nemar avtacha miyuchedet leAvram. Right? Avraham Avinu got a special, right, explicit promise. Ve'gamet ben ha'ama legoyas imenu ki zarachahu. Okay. When Hakadosh Baruch Hu told Avraham Avinu the prophecy that he's going to have a son, right, and and Hashem said and Avram said, Lu Yishmael Yechel Lefanecha. Right? So he says, Vegamet ben Hama legoy asimeno, ki zarchohu. I will make him into a nation, obviously a powerful nation, ki zarachohu, because he is your seed. V'chein Avram itpalel alav. Right? Right? At the beginning, Lu Yishmael Yechel Lefanecha. דהיינו, שהיה צד לאברהם שכל ההבטחות והבריתות שניתנו לו יתקיימו בדרך ישמעאל. Avram had such a havamina that all of the promises and all of the covenants could be fulfilled through Yishmael. That wasn't mufka it wasn't something that was out of the realm of possibility for Avraham Avinu. Right? Sarah, right, as we know, Sarah had the had the wisdom and the insight to realize that this is zelo lechacha, that it was going that Yishmael was not going to turn out to be the one, and it was going to be her child, not Hagar's child, but that was, and so therefore Abram had to drive Yishmael out. But at the end of the day, right, there was a promise. Right, let's say Yishmael was a contender. Right? He was a contender, and as a contender, right, so even though he lost the race, but he came in second place, and he got a consolation prize, right? And he got something for for having been right, together with Avram, the son of Avram Avinu. And as we know, Chazal tell us at the end that Ishmael was Choser B'tshuva. Chazal, right? Because it says in the burial of Avram, it says Yitzchak is mentioned before Yishmael, because Chazal Rashi tells us that because it's a sign that Yishmael was Choser B'tshuva. So Yishmael has zchuyot, right? And those zchuyot we're suffering with. V'nimsa shel Yishmael yesh tzad zchut malchut mitzad atzmo. He has a zchut mitzad atzmo. Shalom machmat hagalut shalanu. It's not because we went into Golus and therefore Yishmael picks up what we dropped. No, Yishmael, right? He has his own zchut. He doesn't need our Golus in order to be in a situation of malchus. V'lachein yesh l'Yishmael sheyachut l'Eretz Yisrael. We spoke about last week, right? Famous words of Chazal. Yishmael has a shaychus l'Eretz Yisrael. והוא מחזיק בידו את מקום המקדש עד שיסתיימו זכויותיו. It is not a coincidence that the Makom HaMikdash is in the hands of Yishmael. It's part of his chus. He was until yistaymu zchuyotav. Sometime b'mheira b'yameinu, so the zchuyot of Yishmael will come to an end, and then he will have to relinquish his control over the Mokum HaMikdash, and we'll get it back, and we'll be able to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, Kemoshe Sarich, and not that, as we said, that abomination which is sitting on top of the Har HaBayis. But the fact is that he has it. וזה גם הטעם למה שמבואר בכמה מקומות, שגלות ישמעאל היא הגלות הקשה ביותר. And we have in several places that the golus of Yishmael is the most difficult. כך מפורש ברמב"ם באיגרת תימן. Okay, so here's we're going to bring a couple of sources which Kedai to look at inside. He has some footnotes on the bottom. Again, he's and the footnotes bring not the whole arichus. It's very interesting. The Rambam. If you look in the Igeret Teiman, it's available in different editions. But if you look in the Igeret, in the Rambam La'am has edition. But anyway, it's available in different editions. Anyway, but if you look at the Igeret Teiman, which was a letter which was written to the people from the Rambam who was residing in Egypt, to the Jews of Teiman who were suffering bitterly under the Muslim rule there in Teiman, and were being driven to give up their religion and convert to Islam through great persecutions. So the Rambam there writes at the end, right? He writes about how difficult this is going to be. So maybe let's look at the bottom. Just we can see the Lashon Rambam Gimel in the footnote Gimel. V'zel Lashon Rambam likrat sof Igeret Teiman. Towards the end of this letter to Teiman, the end of it. V'atem achenu. Do right? He called right. He writes, "You, our brothers in Teiman, du'u shehashem yaratanu b'rov avonenu im zot ha'uma." He involved us. Right? The word yarat, we know that from Parashas Bilam, right? That the donkey said yarat haderech. We got involved with through our many sins with this nation. Ritzoni lomar emet Yishmael, or excuse me, umat Yishmael. They write it without the vav here. Umat Yishmael, the nation of Yishmael. Hamarbel etzarenu, who is doing a lot to cause us trouble. V'lahotzi dinim midatam, and they take dinim from their religion. Laharalanu v'lamosotanu, to do evil, to do bad to us, and to despise us. Kemoshi yadanu yiadnu yitaleh, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised us in the Shir of Azinu, v'evenu plilim. Our enemies are plilim. Right? Well, it means that they make up law. Plil is from the law, from the Lashon of judgment, and through their judgments they make enemy. They make things through their laws. They make things difficult from us. V'lo amda klal al Yisrael uma yoter mere'a mimena. And there's never been against the Jewish people a nation which is worse, which has done worse to us. And no nation which has gone to extremes, to lower us, to despise us, to make us less, right, and to strengthen their hatred for us. Ad sheDavid HaMelech Yisrael kisheheru lo beruach hakodesh haraot asher yavru al Yisrael. When through the Ruach HaKodesh of David HaMelech, when he saw right all the bad things that are going to happen to Am Yisrael, right? Lo tza'ak v'lo helil v'lo bikesh tshu'ah al lashon ha'uma. Right? He didn't cry out, and he didn't wail, and he didn't ask for salvation for any nation. Zulat mamlechet Yishmael, except for Yishmael, because it says in the Shir HaMalos, in the first Shir HaMalos, Omar, he said, "O yoli kigarti meshech shechanti molei kidar." Woe to me, because I have dwelt with Meshech, which is, I think, a name for the Arabs. Shechanti, but here alei kedar, the tents of Kedar. Kedar is a reference to the Bnei Yishmael. Okay. V'histaklu ech yachad Kedar mitoch b'nei Yishmael, excuse me, Kedar, and see how he singled out Kedar from all the Bnei Ishmael. And Ishmael had a lot of sons. Why did he mention Kedar, which is one of the sons of Ishmael? Ki Hamishuga, right? That's the Rambam's favorite name for Muhammad, right? Hamishuga Omnam hu mibnei Kedar, kamoshe nodami achso. Right? People who know the yichus of Muhammad know that he came from the family of Kedar, so descended from Ishmael. V'anachnu im heyotenu sovlim me'achnatam v'shikrutam u'pakzutam ma she'en bicholet adam l'sovlo. And we suffer from their deep suppressing us and their falsehoods and their pachazut. Pachaz is literally hastiness, but the quickness to hurt us, is something that people can't even be. It's insufferable. Ve'shavnu kimo she'amar navi v'ani keresh cheresh lo eshma, and we become, as the Navi says, right, I'm like a deaf person, I can't hear. V'kiilem lo yiftach piv, and like a mute person who can't open his mouth. Okay. 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 So then without going into all the rest, but again, it goes on and on. Okay. Okay, etc., etc. Okay, so that's one source. Okay, the other source that he brings in Dalit is from Chein Mashma Gam B'Zohar. Right? He quotes from before that. Reb Chaim Vital, the Ferish Tehillim, the Sefer Eitz Hadas Tov Al Tehillim Chuchavav. Okay. Here in footnote Dalit, he brings from Reb Chaim Vital, who was the Talmud, the primary Talmud of the Arizal. Amar, and it's also in the Shir Amalos, and that we say, right, in Tilim. Yomar Yisrael, Lule Hashem Shaya Lanu, right? Lule Hashem Shaya Lanu B'kum Aleinu Adam. It says Hashem was with us twice. The second time it says B'kum Aleinu Adam. Now, he says, the Chaim Vital says, Rotzalomar Ato, right? It says the first part of the pasuk is Lule Hashem She'elanu, right? Rotzalomar Ata be'elu adal Malchios. That refers to the four Malchios. Aval yesh od galut chamishi. But then he talks about the fifth galus. Acharon l'kula v'kashem mikulam. It's the last one and the most difficult. Who galut Yishmael hanikret pere Adam. So Yishmael has the name Adam also attached to him. He's a pere Adam, but he's an Adam. Ve'eino nimshal el chayot. Yishmael is not compared to the chayot. As we know that in Sefer Daniel, all the different malchiot are compared to different animals, but Yishmael is not an animal. Yishmael is an Adam. Pere Adam is an Adam. Ve'az yomer yisrael be'ofen acher. That's the next part of the pasuk. V'ulei Hashem she'elanu b'kum aleinu Adam. The pasuk says that, right, that Hashem has to be with us when Adam rises up against us. Ki liyoto Adam, because he's an Adam, l'sibate yoto ben Avram. The next page, right? Because he's the son of Avram. V'yesh lo zchut avot. Geshemot shematzino shemar lu yishmael yichel lefanecha. V'gam yesh lo zchut hamila. He also has a zchut of bris milah. Ki gam l'siba zu nikret Adam. V'lachein galuto takifa mishar dalud malchiot. Therefore, his galus is more powerful, right, than all the other dalud malchios. Uchmo shomer Chazal ki lachein nikrash Yishmael. It is interesting. Chazal said, why was his name Yishmael? Al she'atidim Yisrael litzok se'akot gedolot b'mei gedulato v'yaz Yishmael kel v'yanem. Right, he's called Yishmael because of his oppression, because of his cruelty to us. Am Yisrael is going to call out to Hashem, and Hashem will listen to us. Yishmael, Hashem is going to listen to our tefillos, and he's going to be the cause of that, because he's going to make life so miserable for us and it's going to be so difficult. So anyway, all of these things are, right, as the emphasis is, as we said before, on Yishmael standing as a independent koach, right, who has the koach of Malchus, which does not stem from the Arba Malchus. Okay, let's go to the top of the page. So Bemet Tzarechiyun, so Moshe says, Ma yeh malchuto shel Yishmael ati lavo. What's going to happen to the Malchus Yishmael when Mashiach comes? The Bishlem Adalad Malchiot, Kivin Chetzim Koach Malchut Shem Hu Machmat Al Malchut Shenitlam Eitanu. I understand the other Malchiot, since their Malchus was because of what was taken from us. Because once there's a Gula, so they have no more claim on the Malchus. He says he's wondering, right, why will it be that just because there's going to be a Geula, which is going to take us out of Golus of the other nations, and because they'll be able to reclaim our Malchus, but where is Yishmael going to stand? In other words, it's not so pashut to Moshe here that Yishmael will be, well, that there's a question mark on maybe Yishmael will have some kind of higher position than the other Malchios. Because the other Malchios, once their Golus is over, once we'll take back everything, and so they're certainly going to be reduced to non-consequence. But Yishmael, since Yishmael has its own koach, so even if there is a geula, what's going to happen to Yishmael? And Rabbi here in this book here leaves it as a tzorchim. We're not quite sure that Yishmael is going to be totally vanquished like the Romans and like the Persians, like all the others, and completely goes out. Who knows? Maybe there will be some residual schus that again. I mean, I'm just reading the words here. This is not my ideas, but I'm just reading the word. The Ramesh is saying tzarchim. It's not clear what's going to be because he says l'chora ein advarim tluyim zeh b'zeh. The fact that we're going to get the Malchus is not at all dependent upon what happens to Yishmael. Right? So therefore, who knows? Right? We may have to learn Arabic after all, or something, or they'll learn Hebrew or something. I don't know. But who knows? Okay, I'm just pointing out that this is an interesting open question that's left here, hanging in the air. Okay. Now he's going to bring us a little bit deeper into the sugya. Okay. Maybe clarify the sugya. He's going to bring us a little different. Divrei hayalkut b'parshas Lech Lecha. Okay, and now he's going to quote from a lengthy medrash in Parshas Lech Lecha. He's going to be part of it, right? But we'll say, Kedei levarer et hasugya, yesh le'ayin b'dvarim b'mekoram b'chazal. You have to look into the matter in Chazal, right? And into the sources. V'yesh b'zeh drachim shonot b'drashim shonim. Okay, there's different drashim, right? Okay, so it's not clear, and as we know, we can't know that we can't predict exactly how things are going to work out because there's too much obscurity even in the words of Chazal, and just like in the words of Daniel himself, as we learned in the earlier shurim, they can be interpreted in numerous ways. So the words of the Chazal themselves are contradictory and have different malachim. So how it will be, we don't know. But anyway. V'yesh b'inyan zeh midrash miyuchad. A special, right? Something stands by itself. Hamuva b'yalkut shimoni u'mekoro b'pirkei Rebbe Lezer. Okay, so the Yalkut Shimoni is a later collection of midrashim, right? Which we have. That's available. I have on my shelf here, and right, the Yalkut Shimoni, and the Makor is Pirkei Rebbe Lezer. Pirkei Rebbe Lezer is an older medrash, which is, according to the traditional Chazal, is attributed to Rebbe Lezer Hagadol, Rebbe Lezer the Tana. Okay. And that's very interesting things. And he tells us where to find this is Bereshis Tet Vav Remez Ayin Vav. That's the Seder Hadvarim in the Yalkut Shimoni. It goes what they call Remez. If you open up the book, you see like different paragraphs. So it goes in kind of from the beginning of the Torah to the end of the Torah. So this is at the beginning. This is Parshas Lech Lecha. This is Ayin Vav. Vehu mi Pirkei Rebbe Lezer Per Chavches, and the source of it is Pirkei Rebbe Lezer. Elisha Pirkei Rebbe Lezer sheyesh biyadenu ksat chaser. the version that we have of the Pirkei Eliezer is lacking a little bit, but the Yalkut is giving us a fuller version. Okay, so what does he say here? This is a quote from the Yalkut. Hanisayan Ashvi. What was the seventh Nisayan? Avraham Avinu had 10 tests. So the Chazal tell us give us what they were. So the seventh test. It says this is the bris bein absarim. After these words, let me just get a chumash just to follow up. Okay, so in Parashas Bris bein absarim and Parashas Lech Lecha. Okay, היה אחר הדברים, פרק ט"ו פסוק א', אחר הדברים האלה היה דבר השם על אברהם במחזה לאמור, in a vision. And Al Tira Avram, don't be afraid, Anochi Mogen Lach. So let's see what the Chazal say. Right. Chol HaNivraim, excuse me, Chol HaNevi'im, Nir'a Lahem B'chazon. So all the Nevi'im had a chazon. Well, Avraham Nigle B'mar'eh B'chazon. I did not look into the difference between mar'eh and chazon, both words for vision, but it said here in the word that's used in the pasuk, b'machazeh. Machazeh is chazon. Okay, I mean, basically the words are synonym. Right? Chazeh, chazo is to see, mar'eh is to see. So I don't know what Chazal are emphasizing here, that Avraham Avinu had mar'eh b'chazon. Right. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Right. So this is Rabbi Eliezer. This is the quote from the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Her'a Kadosh Baruch Hu le'Avram Avinu b'Brit Bein HaBetarim arba malchiot. He showed him the 4 malchiot. Moshlan ve'ovdan. They're being moshlim, they're being rulers, and they're lost, their destruction. Shinemar, as the pasuk says, Vayomer Elav. Okay, so he says to him in the bris. Okay, he says to him, first of all, he says that you'll have your children. He says he takes them out of the tent and he shows them the stars, and he says, Ho Zarecha, you'll have these children like the stars. Hashem, then it says Avram believed, Amin B'Hashem, Avram believed, and then Hashem says to him, right, Ani Hashem asher tzeissicha me'ur kasti moses lecha es haaretz hazos v'vishta, right, Vayomer Hashem Elokim Vayomer Elav, and this is the bris. Pasuk Tes in Perek Tezvav in Bereshis. Kecholi egla mishuleshes, take for me a, right, 3, okay, according to the way Rashi translates it, right, is three eglos, 3 calves. V'eiz mishuleshes, and 3 goats. V'ayil mishulash, and 3 rams. V'tor, v'gozal. So a tor is a kind of a dove, right? And a gozal is also a pigeon, right? Okay, okay. Right. A tor is so the Targum says a tor is a shafnina, which is how we always translate the word torim in the Chumash, and the gozal is a ben yonah. Rashi brings it, tor ben yonah. Okay, so those are the things you have to bring. You have to bring the calves, the goats, the rams, and a tor and a gozal. But let's see what Chazal have to say about this. Okay, I'll say something interesting here. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Her'a HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'Avram Avinu b'Bris Me'asorim arba malchiot, Moshlan ve'ovdan, their ruling, their ascendancy, and their destruction. Shenemar, Vayomer Elav Kol Yeglo Meshuleshes, Zu Malchus Edom. As I mentioned before, here we have a different order of the Malchios. Here we start from the end. Okay, Malchus Edom, right? Shehi ke'egla dasha. Right? So why was he called an egla? So Chazal say it's like an egla, like a calf, dasha, which threshes, from the word dash, right? Okay, and that means that it tramples on things. That's how I understand it. Right? That's somebody has a different shot, but that's how I understand it. Edom is compared to a egla. A's mishuleshes, right? What's the A's mishuleshes? The goat. Zum malchus yavan shenemar utzvir ha'izim higdil ad meod. In the pasuk in Daniel, it's called Yavan is called the goat. V'ayel mishulash is malchus, right? Madai uparas, those are the Persians. Shenemar ha'ayel asher ha'ita bal ha'karnaim. So that's also to Daniel. It's talking about the ram, right, which with the horns. Okay, so the ayel has horns, and that's a reference to the Persians. Okay, so we have, how many do we have here? We have so far Edom, right, Yavan, and Madai and Poras. So that's in reverse chronological order, right? Because for the Romans, the Greeks, and the Persians, that's in the reverse chronological order. Now we have something very surprising in the Medrash. Vitor, which is we translate that as a bird. Elu b'nei Yishmael. So these are the b'nei Yishmael. Tor, says the Medrash, Lashon Aramis, shor, Tor. Because in Aramaic, an ox is a tor. So midrashically, we're reading the word tor in the Chumash as an ox, okay? As if it were an Aramaic word. And then it says, Ei la'aretz. The Medrash goes on to say, woe to the aretz, to the land, kesheyitzamed shor zachar im hanekeva. When there will be a coupling of the male shore with the female. Yifitzluchu v'yishadadu et kol amakim. They will destroy, right, open and destroy all of the valleys. So that means who are these? Again, so remember, the female was Edom. Right? That was the egla. That was the calf. Okay? So that was the egla. That was the female. And Yishmael is the Torah. Okay, that's the male. That's the ox. So we have the male ox and the female calf, and when they join together, so then it's going to be big trouble for the world. Okay, the gozal. What is the gozal at the end of the pasuk? The bird. Heli Yisrael. Shenimshu lu legozal. Yonati b'chagvei asela, as it says in Shir Hashirim, my dove is in the crevices of the rocks. Achas hi yonasi, right? My dove is alone, is special in the world. Lo ne'amar l'shon mishuleshet, ela giborei koach. And what does mishuleshet mean? When we speak about the different animals, that's powerful. As the pasuk says that the string, the rope, which is made of 3 strands, will not be cut easily, and so that refers to all of the mishuleshes, right? The egla mishuleshes, the A's mishuleshes, and the ayel mishulash. Those are all talking about mishulash. There is an adjective which means powerful. Right. Okay. The Seder. Ad kan, the words of the Medrash as far as Reb Moshe is. Yeah. Ad kan, the words of the Medrash as Reb Moshe is quoting it. I said there's more there. So it's very long, but everybody's invited to look at it, but we're not going to look further than what is actually quoted in the book here. But that's the essence of it. Okay. V'nei. Shav shemedrash medaber al arba malchios. Yesh kan shinui mahuti. There's a fundamental difference. Me'aseder ragil shel malchiot. B'tchila, first of all, yesh rak shalosh mitoch malchiot regilot. First of all, we only have 3 of the normal 4. Right? We've left out Bavel. And Haramuzot be'egla eiz ve'ayel mishulashim. right? So because we left out Bavel, we only have Rome, right? Edom and Yavan and Paras. Veheim ofiot misof la'atchala, and they're in reverse chronological order. Kodem Edom, achar Yavan, achar Paras. Umalchut Bavel klal lo mofia. Bavel isn't on the list at all. Ve'achar kach kedavar nifrad, and afterwards as something separate. Ba Yishmael k'amalchut harevi'it, right? And you see it's different because the other are in threes, right? They all have the din, or they're all mishuleshet, they're all mishulash, right? And Ishmael is all by himself as a malchus haraviz, the fourth malchus. Ramuz ba'of hanikra tor kasher hamedrash doresh oto al shem habehema hanikra shor. That's the word tor in the Chumash. According to the medrash, is darshan with the word shor, which is an ox. Okay, so says Rabbi Ube'emet ze karov l'shitat ha'Eben Ezra shemevi haRamban. This medrash is close to the shita of the Eben Ezra, which is quoted in the Ramban. She Yishmael hi ha'malchut haravit. Okay. So this is a mechudesh shita, right? This is the shita of the Eben Ezra, and it's brought in the Ramban. Okay, and we're going to see the Ramban down and below in a minute, right? Okay, let's see the Rambam before we see how Moshe characterizes the Ramban. Okay, so the Eben Ezra is indeed, right, you'll see. Look at the Ramban in footnote Vav. This is the Ramban in Bamidbar Chof Daled Chof. This is at the end of the Nevuos of Bilam. Okay, at the end of the prophecies and the blessings of Bilam, where he talks about the end of days, he talks about what's going to be with the Roman, he talks about all kinds of things which are hidden things for the end of days, right? That's all in the Chumash. And um, and okay, so let's see how the Ramban says. So this again, by the way, I looked into it, but it's not this piece of Ramban is not in the old standard Mikros Gedolos Rambans. It was censored, and it's not there. Okay, or it wasn't there. Okay, it's in. I have the Parish the Ramban al Torah, which was put out by Mossad of Cook by Chaim David Chevelle many years ago, 50, 60 years ago. That was probably right. With footnotes annotated, and still the classic example work of the edition of the Ramban al Torah. It's also, I happen to have another edition of the Mikros Gedolos, the Oz V'Hadar edition that does have it in there. So in case you're looking for it and you don't find it in your Mikros Gedolos at home, don't give up. It's there. Okay. So this is the quotation from the Ramban, and as they say, the last Ramban on the Nevuos of Bilam. So he says here, the Rabbi Avram, right? Rabbi Avram is the Eben Ezra, nishtabesh bazeh. He got it wrong, right? Shibush, right? Beferusho leDaniel bet lametet. And indeed, if you look in the parish of Ibn Ezra, it's on the standard Mikros Gedolos, the parish of Ibn Ezra and the and Daniel. It's here. He writes it explicitly. So the Ramban, right, says that the Ibn Ezra made a mistake. What was the Ibn Ezra's mistake? V'yichnis bahen malchus Yishmael. Among the four malchios, he listed malchus Yishmael. Ki nafal pachdam alav. He says, why did he do it? Because the fear of the Ishmaelites was upon the Ibn Ezra. Right? In other words, he was. It doesn't mean that he was literally afraid for his life, but the power of the Ishmaelite kingdom in his days was so powerful that he just felt that they had to be, included in the Malchios. V'ta'an, and this was the claim of the Ibn Ezra. How can that not, such a great and powerful nation, how could that not be included? Says the Ramban, right? V'zu ha'ta'ana mechisaron dat. Okay, pretty strong language. Right? This taina of the Ibn Ezra comes from a chisaron dat. Okay, and he goes on to explain what we've been talking about. Ki arba malchiyot shera Daniel kulan omdot zu achar zu, right? Because the arba malchiyos are one after the other. Kol achat goveret ala kodemet. Each one, right, overpowers the one before it. V'tofeset hamalchut mimen and grabs the malchut from it. V'chol achat mamshechet b'Yisrael shibud v'galut b'mei malchuta. And each one continues the shibud and the galus of Israel. Ulakach horad Daniel bechalomo ki ishtabdu banu hakasdim. This was in the visions of Daniel. First will be the kasdim, which is Bavel. Achrem yitfesu haparsiim hamalchut ishtabdu banu. Then the Persians. Achrem mekomam hayavanim. Achrem yigbaru haromayim. V'yitfesu hamalchut v'yishabdu otan ad eight ket. And the Romans, that's forever until the thing. That's why the Malchus Edom is called the Tahom. The Tahom is the depth without an end. Kilot tipasek malchutam rak biyad HaGoel. The malchus of Rome will only end with biyad HaGoel. So Rav Moshe character, let's go back to the top there. Ubemet ze karov l'shitat ha'Eben Ezra shemevi Ramban sheishmael hu malchut revit uchiyadua haRamban sham lo eglo. It's not a nice word. He sort of makes fun of him. But, I mean, that's what he says. He sort of makes his life. Omer, shehu asat Yishmael malchut revit, raki nafal pachdam alehem, quoting the Ramban, right? Because he was afraid of them. The Ramban atzmo sover she'adom hi malchut revit. The kan medrash, but if you see the medrash, the Yalkut that we just quoted, nira she'Yishmael nechshav malchut revit. Yishmael is it? V'zel yedei she'malchutam yetziruf bein Edom v'Yishmael. So he says the real pshat is, so what's the real pshat? The Medrash sounds like the Ishmael and Chazal tell us Edom, because the real pshat is that's going to be a combination of Edom and Yishmael. Uchamosh Medrash mamshich, Ayla Aretz kesheyitzamed shor zacharim in the keva. To the land when they become a pair, they come coupled to each other. The Zachar within a keva, Dahainu Yishmael haramuz b'shor, Im Esav haramuz be'egla. Okay, let's just finish the next paragraph before we stop today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could we go over? I'm a little confused about that Taina and the counterclaim of Ibn Ezra and the Ramban.
Yeah,
So
the Tana of the Ibn Ezra is that the Tana of the Ibn Ezra is that that it must be that if Chazal mentioned four Malchus, so then since in his day, right? Remember the Ibn Ezra lived in something like the 12th century, right? Since in his day, Malchus Yishmael was the all-powerful Malchus, so therefore that must be the fourth Malchus. Right? There is, and this is borne out, so to speak, by the Medrash that we just read, right? The fourth Malchus is the Tor, which is the shore, and that's the fourth Malchus. And so the list in the Yalkut, in the Medrash of the Yalkut, right, leaves out Bavel and seems to put in, right, insert Yishmael, right? That was the time of the Ibn Ezra. It has to be that Yishmael has to be on the list because Yishmael is so powerful. And the Ibn Ezra and the Ramban says no, that the Ibn Ezra got it wrong. That true Yishmael is powerful, but the inyan of the Arba Malchus, as we've been saying, is Arba Malchus who took Malchus Yisrael, and it was in sequence, right? Babel, Paras, Yavan, and Edom. That was the sequence. And it's true that Ishmael is very powerful, but that's not one of the Arba Malchus. And as we've been saying, why? Because their Malchus comes from an independent source. They have their own independent power. Now what we're saying is that, but at the end of the day, right, what does it say in the Medrash? That there's going to be a unity. There's going to be a coupling, a mating of the male and the female, right, the shore and the egla, right? And that's how I just want to finish the last sentence here, right? The nearest Kavanah Chazal shekodem b'yas Mashiach yeh chibur ben Esav Yishmael, right? Ukeshehem, there will be a chibur between them, because, right? And because that's what it says, there will be yitzamed. כשהם יתחברו יחד, יהיה חורבן. That's going to be destruction. That's the parish on the Yalkut. Yishmael, they're the biggest destroyers in the world. They destroy everything on their way. Right? For those of us who say slicha, we said it in the slichas of Bahab last week, right? If you paid attention. Kale seir v'chosno. Right? Wipe out, kale, destroy, seir, that's Esav, right? That's Edom, because Edom is a descendant of Seir. V'chosno, and his father-in-law, that's Yishmael, because right, Esav married Yishmael's daughter, as it tells us in the Chumash. V'yalu l'tzion Moshim, and that's when there will be the Redeemer will come to Moshim, when we wipe out this combination of Esav and Yishmael. Dahainu sheyesh po shtei shvarim, two oxen, hamechubarim bezivuk, who are mated together, b'bechinat kalei seir v'chosnam. Okay, right. Ve'al af she'arbei dvarim shenemru be'inyan HaMashiach, and even though a lot of things Mashiach v'tkufa kodemet lo einam brurim dayam, so a lot of things are not clear. Adavar hazeh hu barur. Because the Rambam also brought this. He also brought these two writers, right? Who are going to join together against the Jewish people. Shelifnei biat HaMashiach yeh chibur bein Esav v'Yishmael. Okay, so we have a lot to look forward to. Right? Bezrat Hashem, Chas v'Sholem, that Trump and the Arabs should get together against us, because then it'll be a big suffering for the Jewish people. But Bezrat Hashem, that's when the Geula is going to come in some form or another. As they say, we don't know how it's going to happen, what's going to happen. We're learning Divrei Torah, trying to understand what the Torah tells us. Okay? Hashem will, how it'll actually play out. Okay, stay tuned. Okay, Seder, good. Good. So Mirza Hashem. Next week, Mirza Hashem will meet, and again, next week is Rosh Chodesh Sivan already, and we'll try to finish up. It's not a long chapter here. I'm trying to finish up next week, this chapter. Okay. All to have a good weekend, everybody. Okay. Bezrat Hashem, we should be zocha to a geula shleima b'meira b'yameinu. Amen. The call to be well.